Stories, what's your best I've messed with the wrong person moment? Story 1. In high school, I took AP US history from a Vietnam vet. He was a stern man with no patience for bullshit and a heart of gold. I love his class. He presented history based on factual documentation and with as little bias as possible. He forced us to critically think and encourage discussions regularly. His tests were always 50 multiple choice, 50 true or false, and 2 timed essay questions. You always studied for those because the easiest part was the timed essay. There were no easy multiple choice questions. For example, if it asked you the date of an event, unless you knew the correct answer, all 4 answers made complete and total sense. When the class did well, he baked us brownies. I'm not sure if they were delicious on their own merit or because we earned them, but they tasted like victory. To this day, I've never had a more challenging or rewarding class. The only sign of his service was a small banner that read Army Ranger. He kept posted on his window. From time to time, he'd tell us silly stories about his unit, but kept most of his service secret. Some kids did some snooping, and a rumor he had been tapped for Delta and was a sniper in Vietnam starting flying around school. Aside from AP US history, he also taught psychology as an elective. I signed up because I loved his classes, also brownies. On the first day, he handed out syllabuses and gave a brief overview of the things we would be covering. When he finished, he asked if there were any questions we would like answered. I think part of the reason I loved his AP class was my classmates. We were all there because we wanted to be and took our academic pursuit seriously. Psychology was not the same batch. This moron kid, who I recently found out is incarcerated on multiple DUI counts, as well as domestic abuse and possession with intent to distribute, raised his hand. He asked how many men, women, or children he had killed in Vietnam, and whether or not he had kept ears as trophies. Immediately, everyone in the class knew how incredibly this kid was. There are some lines you don't cross, especially when you're talking to a guy who had a heart attack and a week later was out running 10 miles a light jog. As he put it, the teacher handled it professionally and said he was only taking questions pertinent to the class. The kid followed up with, so like 20 or what? You know that moment when you drop a glass and realize there's nothing you can do to save it. The only you can do is brace for the impact. Imagine that moment lasting longer than it takes for a glass to fall. Imagine it felt that way for a full minute, 2 minutes, an hour, a lifetime. That's how it felt in that room. Everyone looked intently at their belly buttons while we waited for the hammer to drop. Well, everyone except for me. My eyes were squarely on my teacher. He used to say that life is defined by the trying moments, the difficult ones. It's easy to act morally and justly on a full belly. The mark of a man is how he handles himself under duress. His jaw clenched and lips tightened as he placed his hands firmly on the podium he lectured from. He was a master of the slow blink and now employed it with devastatingly terrible connotations. Mr. Redacted, please collect your belongings and see yourself to the office. I will be along shortly. The classroom sat in silence. We knew how it felt when he was disappointed we didn't do better on a quiz. We knew how it felt when someone asked a boneheaded question. But this feeling here was new. It was coals of anger restrained only by sheer force of will. It was rage incarnate. What? The kid smiled and looked around at his silent classmates. Did I say something wrong? Why do I have to go to the office? I wish I could say this kid had a steal, but all evidence points to the contrary. He had brains of mush, Mr. Redacted. His voice was even and controlled, but radiated power. You will collect your belongings and see yourself to the office right now. He repeated again, slower and more clear. I will assist you in doing so. And then it hit, like a tsunami wave crashing against the shore. He realized how much he really was in. He wasn't being sent to the office because the teacher was angry. He was being sent to the office for his own well-being. Finally breaking my sight line, I look at the kid. His face was pale and mouth slightly open, signifying the epiphany currently washing over him. He quickly grabbed his stuff, not even bothering to put them in his bag, and left. My teacher took a deep breath, closed his eyes, and then said, "Are there any other questions regarding my class?" What I should have said was nothing. What I actually said was, "We still get brownies for doing well on tests, right?" He looked at me with the same cold eyes my classmate had earned. My boisterous confidence shriveled under the gaze. I had taken the anger from being asked if during a war he had butchered innocence and redirected it onto myself with a smart-ass question. I will be joining my idiot counterpart soon. He gave me a slow blink and said, "Everybody but you, Mr. Kid, everybody but you." He gave me a small, rare grin as the class sighed and chuckled. "Please open your textbooks to page some number and begin reading. I have other ahem matters to attend to. I will return momentarily." The kid transferred classes that day. 3 weeks later, I received my first, last, and only personal pan of brownies for a perfect score on his test. Story 2, it's a story about my brother. We're from Ireland, but now my brother lives in Boston with his fiancée. I flew to Boston to visit for a couple of weeks, and we decided to go downtown one night to hit the bar scene. It was me, my brother, and his fiancée. Anyways, we're standing in line when all of a sudden a guy pushes through us and takes a spot right in front of us. He was wearing a military uniform, Navy, I think, although I'm not 100% sure. My brother's fiancée fell to the floor because of this guy, and all he did was look over his shoulder and snigger after he did it. Naturally, my brother confronted him, but was met with various insults that was ended with something like, "You see this uniform, guy? You off." So, yeah, it's an understatement to say that my brother has a sharp temper. After a few seconds, my brother stuck his boot into the side of the guy's knee, which caused him to fall towards the floor like a sack of. As he was falling, he was caught with a serious right hook, which in turn knocked unconscious. I don't know what happened after that, as we had to leave the area sharpish. It proves you're not a hard ass, because you're wearing a fancy uniform. Edit, it should also be a lesson that you shouldn't act like a tough guy to someone you don't know, as they could be well capable of taking you apart. My brother is 61, weighs around 230 pounds, and trained in boxing for 5 years before moving on to training in Muay Thai and taking part in MMA for the past 3 years. I outweigh him and am taller, but I'd weep for my if I had to fight him. Story 3. In 7th grade, I grew from 5 feet 2 inches to 5 feet 9 inches within a span of 8 months. I went from being of average height to looking over the heads of 85 of my classmates. Never really got picked on, but now I had a sudden confidence that I could take on anyone that messed with me, and I was for the most part correct. One day, my older brother, whom is 7 years my senior, but only 5 feet 8 inches, and I got into it, and I finally physically stood up to him. I took a full-fledged swing with all of my weight, and it didn't faze him. He just got mad. He put me in a full Nelson, slammed me into the hallway wall face first, then proceeded to use his chin to dig it into my neck for near a minute. I was crying and almost passed out. Right after my swing, I distinctly remember thinking, fuck, he's gonna murder me in our parents' basement. TLDR, hit puberty, got overconfident. Older brother reminded me that I was just a really tall 13-year-old. Story 4. From a friend and one of the bouncers at the club he works at. This bouncer had not long started work and was sent by a security agency to cover a shift in Merthyr Tydfil. I've not been, but heard it's quite a rough area, and during the night, the head doorman refused entry to a guy for being too drunk and for being involved in an incident at a different nightclub a few weeks prior. The drunk dude began to get all up in the head doorman's face, threatening to come back with the boys. This is usually quite an empty threat. Normally, a drunk dude gets all angry for a bit and then walks away, moved on by the police. In this instance, the guy walked away, and the new bouncer who was covering thought the issue had passed. 30 minutes later, the drunk guy returns with 15 of his friends. Marching down the road like a scene from Green Street Football Factory, the new bouncer is watching these guys approach with the head doorman, thinking, fuck, we're going to be in a spot of trouble here. He sees the head doorman reach inside his coat pocket. Holy, does he have a weapon or something? It's going to hit the fan. The head doorman produces a gum shield from his pocket, puts it in his mouth, and limbers up his neck and cracks his knuckles, all in complete silence and calm. The lads approaching see this and pause before one shouts, "Nah, that mate," and they all scatter. The new bouncer asked not to be sent there on cover again. Edit formatting. Edit 2 for our international brothers and sisters non-sport types. A gum shield is a mouth guard me, but a friend I was traveling with when I was 20, we were in a DCA drum corps for the summer, on our way to a show in PA or something. We had stopped at a Wendy's to eat. While we were there, a group of bikers, obviously part of club, came in the same Wendy's to eat. They sat behind us. My friend decided to try to hit me with his straw paper. His attempt went right past me and hit a biker in the back of the head. We go dead silent, waiting for a reaction. Nothing. We let out a deep sigh of relief and continue eating. As we were heading out the door, my friend decides to use the bathroom. I wait for him on the bus. A few minutes later, he comes flying out of the Wendy's, red-faced and looking terrified. Apparently, a biker had met him in the bathroom, cornered him, and explained I'm a nice kind of biker. So I'm going to let you off with a warning, but be aware that many bikers would be kicking you right now. Get out of here. That was the end of shooting straw paper. Story 5. It was my sophomore year of HS. I was walking across the parking lot after school on the way to my friend's car when another student car comes hauling down one of the aisles and almost hits me. They start honking at me like it's my fault, so I flip them off and keep walking. They chase me down 3 or 4 aisles as I just keep casually walking across the lot. When they finally catch up to me, this crazy, I go to school with jumps out, ready to kill me. This is the guy in school who has been transferred like 10 times because he gets kicked out of every school, deals drugs, gets suspended every other day for beating someone up, etc. So I start apologizing. I don't want any part of this, dude. I know the type of people you can and can't start with. And this guy is crazy as... Somehow, I talk myself out of the beating I had coming and take off with my friends. What I didn't know was that this guy had been expelled that day, And that night, he shot a guy in the face and killed him at a party. Glad I didn't decide to be my usual smart self that day. Story 6, I would like to preface this with the fact that up until this point, I was in a bully. I was 14, and at a summer camp, there was this Russian kid who had lived here for a year with family to go to school. Since he was a foreigner, I immediately singled him out and started picking on him. This went on for about 2 weeks with me mocking him in Russian accent, making jokes about Russians, and generally just being a little. Then one day, he had enough. He picked a fight with me, and ID thought I would have easily won since I had almost a foot on the guy. Nope. I go in for a punch, and he ducks, grabs my arm, and throws me over him onto the ground, breaking my arm in the process. I started crying. I was then taken to the hospital. I went back to camp, and I was forced to apologize to the kid, and I did. We ended up being friends, and he tells me that his dad runs a jiu-jitsu gym in St. Petersburg and is a former Spetsnaz soldier. He wasn't the kind to boast, so I believed him. He told me his dad trained him in jiu-jitsu for most of his life. That day, I learned you probably shouldn't mess with strangers because you have no idea what they are capable of, that everyone should get their kicked at least once in their life, so they know this. Story 7, when I was 14, my brother, one of my longtime mentors and heroes, took me to NYC for my birthday. He was 29 at the time and was on leave from the military. He had left 1st Ranger Battalion and just finished the Army Special Forces Q Course Green Beret. By all accounts, he was and still is a bad mama jamma. He is incredibly quiet and soft-spoken and very gentle. We were on the subway headed to Times Square, and I was standing next to him, both of us holding a vertical rail in the train. From the next compartment, a group of young urban troubadours were passing roughly through the crowd and shoulder-bumping people to get through. When they bumped into my brother, it was like waves crashing into a rock. They eyed him, and the leader of the group said something along the lines of, "Who the are you? Are you supposed to be tough or something?" To which my brother calmly responded, "Actually, I am tough. If you care to find out for yourselves, let's wait until we're off the train. I'd hate to leave a mess in here." They made the wise choice of leaving at the next stop. Story 8, when I was younger, my family would go rafting with a couple other families down a very calm river. People would often bring some kind of squirt guns, and people would try and fire at people in other rafts. Everyone on the river did this. Well, one time we were floating by a very large group, at least 40. They had all their rafts tied together, which were all covered by towels. We thought, oh boy, we should get them. Look how many people there are. This will be epic. Mind you, this is 9-year-old mentality. Then we issued the first strike. This is where things went wrong. They shouted, I wouldn't do that. We had heard this before, an opposing raft issuing mild threats to get us to not fire our Tinker Toy squirt guns. Hence, we continued. Another warning, I really wouldn't do that. The measly firing ensued, then a loud, "You've really done it now." And this is when I thought I messed with the wrong person. Suddenly, the sound of a generator came across the river. The group of 40 unveiled all of the towels, only to display they had a fire hose. The pressure from the fire hose was insurmountable and could easily reach the other side of the river. Our entire group was heavily doused in a matter of seconds. Needless to say, the squirt gun game ended quickly. TLDR shot people with squirt guns on the river. They shot us with a fire hose. Story 9. When I was on vacation in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt, I saw a Russian girl carrying her own food in beach where you can't. Very stupid rules. So one man from that beach staff tried to take that food from her. She didn't want her food to be taken from her and tried to rip it off his hands. So that man hit her in the face so hard that her glasses shattered. Unfortunately for that man, girl's boyfriend, or probably husband, noticed that. He was like Hulk, but not green. So Hulk punched that guy so hard that he immediately lost his consciousness and dropped on the sand. After 10 seconds, 2 of the almost dead guy's friends came to beat that Russian Hulk, but with no luck. One had his face smashed into the table, and other was hit with Hulk's smash in his stomach. And sorry for my English. Story 10, I'll share a story from the perspective of the guy you shouldn't with. My little brother, and I pull into a parking lot, and another car is coming at us from the opposite direction and was drifting into my lane a little bit. My bro reaches across the seat and honks my horn for me, and the car moves back over, slams on the brakes, does a quick turn, and starts tailing me as I park. I pick a spot, and the car stops in a lane behind me. And this dude gets out of the car with a super angry scowl and starts heading over to my door like he's got a problem. I look at my bro and go, way to go, and step out. And the dude stops dead in his tracks when he realizes I'm basically a monster at almost 7 tall and 300 pounds. He doesn't even say anything and just dips back in his car and peels out, and my brother and I start laughing our asses off. Then I hit him for touching my horn. Story 11, different kind of story at work. I had a chessboard and would play with various people during lunch. None of us were particularly great or anything. It was just a fun diversion. One day, one of my coworkers came up, an older woman who was always very sweet and quiet, and asked if I want to play a game. She destroyed me. Like, it wasn't even a close game. Towards the end, I would make a move, and she would just say in the sweetest tone possible, "Oh, are you sure you want to make that move?" Destroyed. Turned out she had actually competed in some chess tournaments when she was younger, and both of her sons were active competitors. Story 12 was working in NASA grant SBR many years ago. Got paid, closed the grant, too frustrating and hassleful, would not do again. Literally a year later, got a phone call from a NASA grant admin who wanted some more paperwork. I said I was done with the grant, go away. Admin said, "Well, I won't pay you until you complete this paperwork." Me, "You've already paid me." Admin, "Huh. Well, if you don't give me the paperwork, I'll pay you again." Thought about it for a moment, told him that the paperwork would be there in a few business days. Edit, thanks to Yamim.com. For the suggestion, think of the worst bureaucracy you've ever had to deal with. Unless you already selected NASA. NASA is probably worse. Now, think of the hassle of dealing with a double payment. You don't get to keep the money, you get to go through some tortuous, potentially expensive process of getting the money returned, your books cleared up, or face civil and criminal penalties, paperwork blizzard, maybe a year of hassle. Admin knew exactly what he was saying, and so did I. Story 13, I'm happy to say, I was the wrong person to within this one. I've posted the story elsewhere, but I'll do it here. What this, so I'm biking home from school, and I slip and fall in some mud. Not a terrible thing in and of itself, but a bunch of kids see and start laughing, saying stupid things like, "Herder, I think I'll bike through the mud." Whatever, I brush it off and bike home, thinking what's the worst that can happen? They'll never see those kids again. What I had missed was that a kid I knew from my karate classes was one of those kids, and he took it upon himself to rub that moment in my face every time he could. I tried laughing it off at first, but eventually he took it so far that I had to tell him to off, which only spurred him on more, well into the realm of bullying. Fast forward to karate class, surprise sparring day, and by sheer chance, he and I are the first opponents. Obviously, we both understand this is more than a friendly match. Ref starts us off. We each immediately deliver a resounding punch to the other's gut at exactly the same time. Then there's that moment of stillness, like in anime, when the two swordsmen clash. Then one of them is cut completely in half. This time, however, it's this kid realizing that he can't breathe. He starts coughing, tries raising his arms above his head, but nothing works. Ref asks him if he's okay, but he can't even get a word out. All he can do is sit down with the other students. I go on to win my next few matches. Suffice it to say, this kid conveniently forgets about the mud incident. Story 14, throwaway account, because, well, jail, this happened at work, and I was the wrong person to mess with. We had this reel of a manager, liked nothing more than screw with people. Micromanager from, loved to make people redo work 4 times and berate them every step of the way. He loved to make people schedule work. This is an IT shop after hours for no good reason. Fortunately, he wasn't my boss, but he was a peer to my boss, which meant I had to deal with him from time to time. So I'd been working there about 3 years, and for the most part, ID managed to avoid him. But a few times had managed to screw up my work, but nothing too serious. And then one day, he decided to with me hard. He changed one of the basic functions of my job into an after-hours job. This meant that at least 2 to 3 times a month, I would have to come into the office after midnight to do a 15-minute job. And no, remote access wouldn't work. I actually had to drive in. There was no good reason for it. And I argued it with him, to no avail. I argued with my boss, but he couldn't do anything about it. This was more politically connected, and there was no way to get out of it. This went on for a few months before I finally decided I had enough. Being upfront about attacking this guy was a bad idea and instant firing material. So I decided I'd get my revenge without him knowing who did it. What did I do? I sold his identity online. Well, not sold, actually gave away. It was amazingly easy. First, I had to get his info. I thought that might be hard, but it was remarkably easy. This guy did his banking, shopping, and yes, even his taxes on his work computer. Dumb. I installed a simple keylogger and got all his information easily. All that was left to do was to get it out there. Also not hard. A quick download of a TOR client, a VPN service in Turkey, and a little research, and I was connected to a site that specialized in identity theft. I posed as someone interested in selling identity data. 5 people contacted me, and I gave each of them his information as a sample of my data. Within a few months, this guy I never talked to him directly about it, but I heard through some of his guys that he was in real rough shape. Credit, calls at all times of night till he changed his number, bills showing up at his house for stuff he never bought. It's been almost 2 years since this happened, and he's still dealing with, last I heard, he's trying to get a new SS and never, ever with your IT staff. Edit, I have to admit to being fascinated by the number of negative responses I've received despite an ever-climbing karma score. This guy has caused all kinds of harm to the people who have worked for him. He's had people fired for no good reason, made people who love their jobs quit, caused all kinds of marital stress in the families of the people who work for him. People came to work scared and depressed. This lasted the almost 10 years he worked there. Yeah, his life is a bit of a mess and will continue to be a mess, but no one is dead, and banks, credit agencies have the tools to deal with identity theft. It's not quick, that's for sure, But over time, the shitstorm will come to an end, and he'll be just fine. These kind of guys have been bullying the little people for generations. Personally, I think it's high time that they learn that the little people can hit back, and I'm very glad the internet has provided us with the tools to do so. Whether the attacker throws a punch and gets tossed through a plate glass window, which I'm sure also had long-lasting effects, or up someone's home life and gets tossed into a hellstorm of paperwork and frustration, it serves as a warning. Do not with someone simply because you think you can. I was a college freshman and had a bad week. It's no excuse for my behavior. I thought I was pretty tough as I've taken martial arts most of my life. There was a girl who played on the softball team and was much larger than me that I bumped into walking through. She said, "Hey, sorry, man." I, like a confrontational idiot, said, "You better be sorry." She turned around and said, "Excuse me." I responded by pushing her. She grabbed me by my collar and slammed me against the wall. At this point, the more rational part of my brain said I should apologize and walk away. But I wasn't rational, and I broke free with a cheap shot kick to her chest. Time and time again, I basically pounced at her to attack, and she knocked me to the ground. Finally, she pinned me and told me, "Dude, that's enough. Calm down." I finally relented, but not after basically getting my kicked. She told me I was feisty thing and 55 and was 140 pounds at the time. She was 59, 180 pounds, and my friend apologized that I was having a bad day and never act like that. The girl and I talked later that night and became decent friends. It was then I learned you can't take your shitty attitude on people because they may just give you an adjustment. Story 15, I think I may have told this one on here somewhere, but here goes. Senior year of high school. Sitting in a pep rally, this guy starts making lewd remarks about one of the cheerleaders. Her boyfriend is sitting a couple rows in front of him and overhears. He turns around and tells the guy to knock it off. Guy tells him to mind his own business and keeps talking smack. A quick note about the boyfriend. We grew up going to the same school on the rough side of town. He was a tall, lanky guy, played basketball, and had been in a fair number of fights when we were kids. Anyway, after the pep rally ends, we're all filing out, and as soon as we get outside, the guy jumps the boyfriend from behind and starts wailing on him. The boyfriend turns around and lays the guy out quick. The guy's cousin jumps in, and the boyfriend meets him, and they start trading blows. Another of the guy's friends jumps in, and the boyfriend is fighting off both of them. He lays the second guy out and is about to handle the third when one of the coaches grabs him from behind. Thinking it's just someone else attacking him, he spins around and decks the coach. After that, everything just stopped. The boyfriend was a little bruised up, but the others were way worse off. The first one was still unconscious, the second one looked like he didn't know where he was, and the third was still standing, but had blood pouring out of his nose and one eye was swelled shut. They definitely picked the wrong guy to mess with. Story 16, I used to work at a board game store. Best job ever, 10 out of 10. Would do it again if it was all financially viable. Towards Christmas, we had to hire on seasonal workers to man a kiosk that we had in addition to the store and a mall. Most of the seasonal workers were great, except one. I'll call her Karen. Seasonal workers were hired on a few weeks before the kiosk opened to work in the main store and learn the ropes. I happily showed her around. At first, Karen very quickly established herself as a very clingy, very annoying individual. She talked and baby talked to me, I think, because I was a few years younger than her, and she thought it was cute, but considering him 5'10", and she was 5, it didn't amuse me to be talked down to. I told her this pretty early on, but she thought it was funny that I didn't like it, and only upped it. More baby talk, more pet names. Shed asked to come see my apartment, to join my DD game, to meet my friends, to hang out, constantly, despite all the body language and polite notes that I gave her, extremely presumptuous, constantly talked about herself, and always in a baby voice. I couldn't handle it. On the surface, yes, she could just have wanted to be friends, and I could have warmed to her more, but she was a very unlikable person to everyone in the shop. I was just a person who was polite enough to let her talk my ear off for hours, so she tagged along with me all the time. One day, when I was particularly avoiding her, she kept following me around the shop at a detriment to what she was supposed to be doing. "What's wrong?" Buttercup in a squeaky voice is what set me off, so I sort of snapped. I asked her for probably the 5th time to stop talking to me in a baby voice and to stop the pet names, that I didn't appreciate it and it bothered me. She told me to lighten up and said something that was along the lines of friends mess with each other like that. Get over it. To which I told her we were not friends and that I'd prefer it if we just kept it all at work. When she pressed me on why I felt like this, I told her that she only ever talked about herself and didn't listen to anything I said. So I didn't consider her a friend and would likely never consider her a friend. Am horrible, I know. Am sorry, Internet. So that's when she snapped. After that, I think she made it her goal to either it get me fired, B, make me quit, C, if neither A nor B, make the shop I loved as miserable as possible. It ended up being C. Things that she did, as previously stated. She was hired to be a kiosk worker, and I'd been working there for a long while, so I had seniority and got to work in a main shop. Main shop meant fun events, teaching people board games, a general warm atmosphere, company, etc. Kiosk meant you were alone, sometimes with another person. Standing, the district manager thought that if he gave us a stool, we'd never leave it, and would therefore not see people shoplifting from a kiosk. And it was just generally sad compared to the store. Karen was hired to work there. When the kiosk opened, and I reveled in the fact that Karen wouldn't be passive-aggressive at me anymore. I told her that we weren't friends a few days before it opened. She spent about an hour at the kiosk, then called the main store to say that she couldn't do it, and someone needed to take her place. My manager asked if I would go, so I said okay, and sadly went there. When I got to the kiosk, she gave me a smug look and waddled her way down the hall to the main store. I had a friend at the shop. Most people I considered friends. We'd get together after work and play games most nights. A few were my roommates, etc., etc. But one guy I consider my best friend at the time. They'll call him James. We were very chatty and cracked each other up, but weren't disrespectful to customers. James happened to be working that day when I switched places with Karen, and the manager called to ask me to close up the kiosk a bit early and come back to talk about my working arrangement. I was nervous. James came to help me close up and lamented about how shitty working with Karen was. I laughed. I got back, and Karen was sitting at the gaming table, and my manager took me aside and told me that Karen had a problem with her hip that could be confirmed with her doctor. That meant she couldn't stand for very long without great discomfort. She had told him that she medically couldn't do the job that she was hired for, that she said she was capable of doing during her interview. So he asked me if I would take over for most of her kiosk shifts just through the holidays. I wasn't the only person who would cover her. Everyone from the main shop was asked to switch around to accommodate her. So I wasn't singled out, but from then on I never got to work with James again at the same time. Later on I learned from the district manager that she had reported that multiple customers had complained that we were too busy flirting with each other to assist them. So instead of proving it or reprimanding us, my manager apparently just took it upon himself to separate us. Sucked. That was probably the best part of the job. One day, on a particularly Karen-crazy day, she screamed while she was in the back room. She and I were working the main store together. That also sucked. She came running out of the back with her purse to my manager and pulled out her credit cards and license. On them, the words slut and whore were written with Sharpie. My manager and I just stood there gaping, like WTF. She then casually said that she had hung her purse right next to mine, and that she'd bet that nothing was written on my cards. I asked her if she was accusing me of wrecking her, and she suggested that if it wasn't me, then I was accusing the manager of doing it. The manager, God love him, was a socially awkward nerd who obviously didn't know what to say to any of this. I totally called her out on it anyway. I said that I didn't think the manager had done anything, that I thought she had scribbled the words on her own cards herself to try to get me in trouble. She shrieked and stomped back to the back room, came out in tears, and said that she had called her mom and told her to come pick her up, that she couldn't be expected to work when she was in so much distress and being harassed, and scorned my manager for not firing me. My manager told her that she shouldn't jump to conclusions, and that he didn't think I had anything to do it, because it didn't seem like me. She was so huffy about this, but he totally let her go, just stomp off during the middle of work, admittedly a slow day, but whatever, I was glad to see her go for the night. The day after the crazy purse incident, her mom came into the shop. She came to scorn me, and to yell at my manager for allowing such a filthy, wretched individual work at the store. The second she started yelling at me, I noped the out of there. I was in the middle of restocking anyway, so I just retreated to the back without saying a word to her. The woman was as short as her daughter, but a good 300 pounds, and she looked like she wanted to punch me in the face, so no pino. I still listened to her yell at my manager, telling him that every night her daughter comes home in tears and has such terrible stories about the ways that I torment her. In reality, me working with Karen was me just avoiding her like the plague because of drama, passive-aggressiveness, baby talk, clinginess, overall annoying bitchiness that I don't want to be around. I am so guilty of that. Most of the time, we didn't work directly with each other, just in passing, because I was manning the kiosk most of the time she was working, so I have no idea what story she made up to her mother. If they were along the lines of she scratched the word into my license, then I get the mom rage. But Karen was 27 when I worked with her. I was 20. Having your mom fight your battles for you at that age is pretty weak. My manager stood by me and said he wouldn't fire me, though, and her mom made more vague threats of, if I hear anything heinous about this girl again, I'm gonna get you fired too. Like, holy, I love my job. Don't make me lose my job because your daughter is pathological. Continued.